Welcome all to the third monthly meeting for the steering committee. I'll pass it off to Anil to get us started in a moment. Just some quick items. I think as mentioned, most folks have been using the discussions on GitHub. The forum, the old forum, is no longer being used. You can't write on it anymore. There will be some announcements that will be added to it very shortly, as well as some additional announcements that will be tagged to the current GitHub discussions on how folks can templatize some of their messaging. So look forward to that coming very soon. There's been some SIGs that have already happened this week, and obviously this will normally happen on the Thursday, but because of some conflicts, it's happening on a Tuesday. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Anil to get us started. I'll be taking notes in the background.
Thanks, Tyler. Hey, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can let Tyler take notes. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Let me know if you don't. So wow, yeah, we're on meeting number 3 of the steering committee. This is amazing. We made it through the first quarter. That's awesome. Looks like we're getting in a pretty good cadence, which is great. Not just for this, but for all the SIGs as well. So thanks everyone that joins these meetings and contributes to them both during the meetings as well as async in GitHub. Appreciate all the contributions. We have a pretty good agenda that we've done a couple of times, so we'll just stick to that. But then if there's things that people have burning on their mind, want to bring up, please raise your hand or drop a comment in the chat, and we'll make sure you get the time to address it. So to start off, the first thing we talk about in these meetings is discuss any feedback about this whole process, meaning the whole community development process, and any sort of grievances, conflicts, anything that you want to share about how things are going. So I'm going to pause here, see if there's any feedback from anyone on the call. I have a couple of things that I want to bring up, but I want to give the opportunity to others to talk first. Cool. Absolute silence. So I guess I'll get things going, and maybe that'll spark some conversation. The only thing I wanted to bring up was we have had a pretty good cadence in general of people creating pull requests in the community repositories for specs as well as for meeting notes and stuff. The one ask I have, and I'm guilty of this myself, is there's pull requests that have been open for a while now. These are primarily around some specs and some artifacts related to working groups. The ask I have is if we can do a little bit of work in terms of pushing these along, or at least putting in the version that exists right now as a draft or something, and updating it later. That would be great, because there's a few pull requests that are open, and that's primarily the only thing I wanted to bring up. Awesome. Any thoughts, any other questions, any other feedback anybody wants to share from people running through this over the last few months? Cool. I guess if there's no other things to bring up, we can move on to the second item on the agenda. So the next thing we do here is we review the list of projects, and we see if there's any new ones we should add to the list or prioritize them if people have opinions about what needs to be going first and what needs to be going later. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the projects list page, and we can go through that. Oops, looks like a broken link here. Text list right there. Okay. So yeah, so this is kind of our table of things that people are working on. Console general availability is now done. So I'm going to go ahead and update this after the call, and I'm going to close it out and mark it as closed. So obviously console is generally available right now. It still has a beta mark, but we'll talk about console and its roadmap and what's coming next during the client SIG meeting, which I think is a week or two from now. So I'll save any further comments on console for then. But that item is pretty much complete. The second one here is economics 2.0, and I think we're going to have a discussion from being led by Cheng right after I think this item. So I think that makes sense to have in the second row here as the second priority. And then the third one obviously is a huge thing that's coming up, and that's, we've had a milestone for it already, is Arthur has been leading GPU support and all the code changes, which are pretty significant in the node and the provider repositories. And as of last week, we obviously announced an internal testnet. So Arthur and a bunch of us have been testing out an internal version of this GPU support right now. And he is furiously working on trying to enable this for an external testnet as well. So that makes sense, I guess, in the third most priority in terms of things that are being worked on or fairly far along. But once Cheng goes through his thing today, we can potentially change this one state from spec definition to the next thing. And this is obviously still in implementation, so it can stay there until we at least get to a public testnet. Provider services, microservices refactor. This one's kind of been a little bit stalled and paused, I think mostly because of me. I've just been swamped with a bunch of other things and not had a chance to look at this. Also, I needed inputs from Arthur and Adam on this, and they've both been pretty busy with GPU support. So I think it makes sense to move this down because the next item on this list, which is content moderation, the Praetor team and others, Adam, myself, we've had a few discussions on this, and this seems like it's very far along. And also, in case people on the call missed it, Praetor's funding proposal just passed yesterday, so it's a huge accomplishment for the team. And so I think it makes sense to move this up in terms of priority because I'm assuming they're good to start implementing this. But somebody, Deval or Jigar, should jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, so basically we started working on it, and we'll have updates soon on that.
Amazing. Great work, guys. The next one's client libraries. I believe this can stay right below content moderation. The Luna and the Quasar team are actively working on this. I believe they have like a prototype of the Java client or the Glow client or both. I don't know exactly what. But we're looking forward to a demo soon on that. So I think content moderation can move from ideation to spec definition to implementation, and then this can move. There's obviously an implementation, so we'll make those changes. Console authorized spend is getting started this week. So this is technically spec definition is done. There is actually a pull request right now with that defines the spec for it, as well as wireframes and design from Dennis that are included there. And Joe and the team is going to get started on this week. So this can definitely move to implementation as well. And then I actually misspoke earlier when I said this is stalled on me. This is actually the provider services refactor. I confused it with attributes. Provider services microservices refactor actually is an implementation. It's gone through 2 phases, and it's kind of paused because Arthur and Adam have been focused on GPUs. But provider attributes is stalled on me. I was the one who sort of said he will lead the spec definition for it. So it's still the spec definition, and it can stay where it is, I think. The next one's certification program. I actually don't know too much about what's going on with this. I don't know. I'm hoping that Adam Bosnia or somebody can speak to this. Adam Bosnia, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. What was the question? Sorry, I missed that.
There was an item here called certification program. Do you know what is? I guess this is the EDU program, right? I know you made significant progress on that, but
yeah, sure. I can give it just a quick update on kind of Akash EDU. So right now the Praetor course is live. I'm currently working with actually you on a console course, with Max on a CloudMos course, and with Mr. Luna on a Terraform course. So TBD on when those will launch and when, but the goal is to get a handful of curriculums up there. So eventually we get to the point where people become kind of Akash certified.
Amazing. Thanks, Adam, for jumping in, and sorry to put you on the spot right there.
I was very embarrassed. Thank you.
All right. Doc site migration. I don't know if this is something that we should move down. I personally don't feel like it's a super high priority, but I want to see if anybody else feels otherwise. Go ahead, Luna.
We actually started working on this today from the SIG-Docs meeting. We here are assuming this task of working on the documentation. So I think we can move it to the implementation phase. Yeah.
You're moving to Hugo, right? To Akash website?
Yes. Yeah, we are moving with a solution that uses Hugo and has localization by default, so we can start working on English documentation, but then easily go to international language. We are following the same model as Kubernetes, so we have it as our base
Awesome.
inspiration, let's say.
I assume it's going under akash.network/docs, not docs.
Yes, we are currently working on our own repo, but the idea is to transfer it to the Akash repo.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Amazing, Luna. You guys are amazing for taking on this. Cool. Yeah, so we'll update this one, and it can probably go above provider attributes as well, because it's obviously fairly far along. The next one here is what we're calling omnibus maintenance. And so for people that are not familiar with what was intended here, essentially we have this omnibus repository that stores SDL references for all kinds of nodes, primarily within the Cosmos chains. And the challenge we have with this, and it's something that impacts pretty much all clients, is every so often something changes on one of these chains, or the SDL needs to be updated for some other reason because it isn't working and it's either not spinning up correctly, or it is spinning up, but there's something that has changed in terms of version within the SDL that needs to be updated. So what we need is some kind of a process for where essentially two things happen. There's a group of people that are periodically testing SDLs, and maybe we can potentially take the entire set of omnibus repositories that we care about and split them up into groups or something, and then have people test them out. And then there's like a table or something that's maintained somewhere that is updated and checked and said this is still working on this so and so day, and it's done every maybe 2 weeks or every month or something. And so that's one part of it, is like regular testing and maintenance of it, testing them and fixing any small changes to it. And then the second portion of it is adding support for new chains when they come out. So if there's a new Cosmos chain, adding support for it. So we need somebody to volunteer to take the lead on this. I was going to take the lead on this when I had some time, but right now I don't. And so if somebody on this call or just generally in the community has interest in leading this effort, it'll be great to. The first step would be to basically write kind of a document or a spec for what I just described in detail, like basically what the process is going to be, how often is this testing going to happen, how is it going to be run within the community, where is the information going to be stored for people to look up, which chains are validated and not. And this is important because, CloudMoss uses all these chains within their UI, Console uses it, Terraform provider uses it. And if it doesn't work, it results in a bad experience for the user. I'll pause there, see if anyone has any questions or wants to volunteer to take on this. Silence, I guess, radio silence. I'll try to push a little bit on the community if I can get to this, or I'll try to get to it in a few weeks from now. I won't go through the rest of this unless people want me to, but I'll just point out a couple of things that I think make sense to move up. So there is this item called provider pricing and profitability. This fits really well, Cheng, with the stuff that I think you'll talk about. Sorry, not provider pricing. I was going to say stable payments and settlement. Sorry, I read the wrong ones. So I think it fits very well within the Econ 2.0 thing. The question I have for you, Cheng, is like, should we keep this a separate thing or should we just merge it into that? Either way, I think they should move up because we're actively working on coming up with a spec for this right now.
Yeah, if I can chime in here. Thank you, Neil. I think it makes sense to keep it in its own separate thing, though I do reserve the right to be convinced otherwise. Primary reason just being AKT 2.0 is such a massive endeavor that it probably behooves us to break that down into its subsequent components. I know that doesn't necessarily fully jive with the essence of, I think, how this is constructed here, but that's just my thought process.
Okay. And then event planning 2023, I know, Adam Wozni, you have a bunch of things going on Discord for this. Is this in a state where we should move this up and move it into like a, spec definition or implementation phase, you feel?
Yeah, so right now we're at the stage where we're just about to put it on chain for a vote. Working with Chandra Station on getting that live, hopefully today. All the information is in the Discord channels, in the hackathon and the events Discord channel. So you can review the proposal fully there. It's been kind of live on GitHub discussions for a few weeks now. So we're basically ready to go on chain for a vote.
That's incredible progress. So yeah, this definitely deserves moving up the stable and going into, I guess, implementation, at least at this point. So yeah, we'll make that update as well. And Tyler, you should take a note for that as well. Anything else on this table that we need to talk about, or any items that people are working on that need to be added to this table that you can think of? Speak up now.
Yeah, there is one that I don't think is added on here. It's similar to the event planning 2023. It's an Akash hackathon. I don't know if that would be included in this. That is also has been up for kind of feedback on GitHub and in the Discord working group channel. I'm not sure if that should be added to this, but basically we're to the point to get that on chain as well today for a vote and then implementation. So I don't know if that should be here or somewhere else.
I see. So I guess the decision point for me would be, number one is event planning basically which events do we want to attend, not necessarily us running them. And then hackathons is something obviously that we would run ourselves, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, so I would look at them as two separate things, especially if you're doing two separate proposals for them.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Cool. Sounds good. So we'll create one for hackathons as well and put that to implementation. Cool. Any other things anybody wants to bring up before we move on to the next topic? All right. Switching back here, talked about that. Over to Cheng, I guess, for a presentation on stable payments.
Thank you, Neil. This won't be too lengthy, I promise everyone. I know a little while ago, Greg had introduced AKT 2.0, right, as part of the SIG economics rollout. And AKT 2.0 and in terms of engaging the community on both Discord and as well as in GitHub discussion, we definitely had some interesting discussions on GitHub, though not very lengthy. And especially once we brought that to bear in Discord, it definitely was even less lengthy. And one of the big things here, I think it just internally when we started pulling it apart, determined, I think it became a little bit too much to chew on because there's just so much baked into it, right? There's a payments element, there's a settlements element, depending on provider versus tenant. There is, multi-currency support, which currencies, there's the take rate, where and when, how is that implemented? All of these kind of technical things that in and of themselves can be entire spec definitions alone, right? And you ball that all together in AKT 2.0, it became this kind of really, really heavy thing that became difficult to, I think, take down and depending on the community to say, take the proactive approach of going into each one of these subject matter categories and breaking them down. So internally, we started parsing those out and prioritizing them. And, shout out to Adam Bosnich. I'm not too sure if he's on the call. I saw him coming in and out, but spent some work along with some, in-person time discussion during ETH Denver to talk about, what a MVP rollout of economics, AKT 2.0 would really look like. And the first big thing that we're outlining and we'll be submitting to, GitHub discussions for the community to review shortly. That's something that I'm putting together, and I will be submitting in GitHub for everyone to review and take a look at and engage in discussions there. And from that, we have a proposed spec that could go out to hopefully take into production and get work done on it very relatively soon. And that is going to be primarily in within the sphere of multi-currency support. The first multi-currency support we would like to introduce via this discussion is going to be USDC. And I'll just say USDC and some of the technical, more specific components of which we will go into it, and it'll be outlined in the GitHub discussions. That's number one. And number two is, sorry, no, I don't actually have a presentation, just wanted to talk through it briefly. And number two is going to be the take rate implementation. So those two things will be worked on concurrently side by side in order to really start to bring AKT 2.0 one step closer to full implementation. And so, we're breaking AKT 2.0 into subsequent components, rather, of phases of phase one, let's say MVP, phase two, and phase three, et cetera, with each phase adding more and more features in order to enhance the richness of the 2.0 idea. But the first phase of MVP is really to get all of the supporting components to market functional and as quickly as possible so that we can start to, make significant progress. I know that's really important, of course, to keep that drumbeat rolling. So having said that, in summary, what we'll be pushing to GitHub soon is the stable payments as part of multi-currency settlements, supporting USDC, the take rate for USDC as well as AKT workloads. Those will be differentiated, obviously, and the specific details and how we're going to go about doing that is going to be there. And of course, I'll lean on those who are a lot more technical and actually doing the heavy lifting, aka Adam Bosnich and others, to answer any of the more technical questions. Though I will definitely do my best there. And anyone in the community who do want to chime in, have questions, concerns, thoughts, suggestions otherwise, as far as implementation, reasoning, fair game, please do let us know. We'll look forward to everyone's participation.
Thank you, Cheng. Does anyone have any questions for Cheng about what he said? We'll, of course, have the spec out that we've been reviewing between a few of us, but any burning questions right now? Cool. And while Cheng was talking, I just realized a couple of things about the projects list. So I'll go back here for a second. One is we have also been working on as part of the SIG analytics, we've been working on, number one, understanding what questions we can answer with the existing options that we have for analytical data, whether it's from CloudMOS or some of the existing indexers there, and then defining a spec for implementing sort of a data model for answering some of the questions that we don't answer today, right? So that's been making good progress as well. So I'll add that to the list here. There is a spec that was on review, and then it's inside the SIG analytics now. And we're making good progress on that. We'll update in the next SIG analytics meeting. And there's a good chance we might even get somebody from Masari to join that SIG analytics meeting to talk about, the kinds of data that they would like to see, so that they can go and talk about Akash in their reports, like they do, like they published a report just yesterday about GPUs and talked about Akash. So we'll see if we can get them to join that meeting as well. Yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to bring up on this. Cool. The next one's a discussion about the CloudMOS funding proposal. And I don't know, like Boz or Greg, do you guys want to lead this one?
On a Boz Mazalji, is he here on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
You had some thoughts you posted this morning, right?
Yeah, happy to go through some of the questions, I guess, if that would help the committee.
Sure.
Yeah, so my thoughts around this were generally around sustainability practices generally for projects, and to really understand value relative to cost and impact. And one of the questions I had was, could we have an outline basically of what the path is for sustainability and what the business model would be like? That's one of the questions. Another thought process around this would be if there are pro forma models or projections that teams, at least mature teams that have received multiple fundings from the community fund, could begin establishing and sharing with the community to understand exactly the path for sustainability. And another question around this would be, if the community is funding development for some of these features which benefit the community, would Cloudmos be charging the community as well for these potential future gated features? And if so, would that lead to a conflict of interest based on community funding relative to monetization strategies? Or are there thoughts around some of those features that would be potentially monetized, because it's unclear right now? Would those features then fund back the community fund until those resources are essentially paid back, where then all future monetizations would be profited from? So just generally around profitability, we could go through some of these questions. I know there's other items in here that I'd like to touch on, but we can just distill this in like just section by section, I guess. So I'd love to just hear from Max around his approach to sustainability around his business model for Cloudmos.
Sure. Hey everyone. Hi Buzz. Hi Greg. Yeah, I just noticed that you posted this, so I didn't get the time to read it all in detail, but sure, I can give you a bit of our thoughts towards our sustainability in the future. It's kind of a bit inside the proposal in some places where we talk about some of the features that we plan on monetizing while keeping the core of the features free to use. And our business model that we're aiming to have in the future is basically kind of a SaaS product where there's a free tier for most of the core features for new users to get familiar with and use as a minimal product, and paid tiers where some of the more advanced features or for business features are gated by monthly payments, for example. Right now, it's not very feasible to do this. Well, we could, but I think at the current state of the adoption of the network, I don't think it necessarily makes sense to start doing this, especially with like all the challenges that are mentioned in my proposal. I think these need to be addressed, and like the path, or not the path, but the growth of the adoption needs to be just a lot more in general to get to this point. And this is why we're asking for this grant to get to this point, if that makes sense. What's the other question?
Yeah, I guess I'd like yeah, and I know I recognize I posted this morning. So yeah, I'm more than happy to continue this conversation, or like around sustainability, just for clarity, so it can be a little bit more detailed, just so we can have a frame of reference here. My second question, I guess, would be, how did you get 150K? is it possible to distill Q4 deliverables where implementing improved uptime solutions, the integrate token on-ramp solutions like Cato, improving billing module, and open sourcing CloudMos Indexer and Explorer. Can we distill those or extract those to have billable hours and what rate? So we have the community essentially has a clear understanding of how you arrived at the 150K.
Sure, but the things that you mentioned are for the second proposal, which is currently not, the focus for this current proposal was mostly for the first one, which is a little bit more detailed. I guess, yeah, the way we estimated the amount is kind of, estimating the hours that we think that we would spend on each of the items. And they're rough estimations because sometimes it's a lot of research and development and things can take more or less time. So it's not like regular work that we would do, for example, for a consulting client where things are extremely established and like things are repeat business, for example. But yeah, sure. And I'm guessing you would ask this for Praetor as well, or any other project asking for funding from the community pool?
Absolutely. I'd ask these generally because one of the core things I'd like to understand is just because it's such a large ask, it's to really understand exactly like how those like unit economics for features come out, but also for like multi-quarter. And this is just a personal opinion as a community member on this call here, essentially is how, like, given the state of the economy with macro conditions and nation or states and their approach from like a regulatory perspective, large asks, I think, have quite a bit of risks when it comes to funding. For example, if this funding was to pass and more attacks from the government essentially nuke conditions across the market, not just Akash, to 5 cents, where would that position the community fund overall? How would that risk contribute to other projects in the pipeline and the sustainability of the fund itself? I'm in favor of a quarter by quarter funding approach, but I'm just curious on what your thoughts around that are, as opposed to funding for such a large request.
I guess
And it's not,
I have some thoughts. What we discussed last time was to be more granular in funding requests instead of broad. I haven't seen that feedback taken into account with this new contributions. You start off the proposal with previous achievements and you highlight problems and solutions, but your milestones and projects are essentially in time blocks, in the sense like Q1 you need, Q2, Q3 this you plan to achieve, instead of, hey, I want to achieve SIG analytics implementation for SIG analytics, and I'm going to need 50,000 for it. And these are the expected, deliverables, and this is the timeline. Right? I understand timelines can change, software development and whatnot, but I was hoping to be more granular in terms of like, I need money for X, I need money for Y. If you look at what's his name, the Praetor funding, right? They're very, very granular in terms of what they're asking $50,000 to implement, the solution for content moderation, right? So the concern I have with your proposal, it's the same concern that I expressed last time, right? It's like a very, very broad. It's not granular enough for us to be able to like justify. We want you to get funding, right? I think as Akash community, I use CloudMos. It's still one of my favorite tools. I think we need sustainability, but I don't want to create a precedence where if this goes through, we're going to have newer, I mean, you're going to have other ecosystem players follow lead, right? So it's very important we get this right. So that's why I wanted a more granular approach. You're proposing quite a lot of projects here. Like, okay, so another challenge is a lot of reputation, right? So now CloudMouse has a web-based tool. It's Console as well. Console came first as a web-based tool, but you have a proposal here. You're going to invest into making CloudMouse web, a lot more. But there's no like plan to merge CloudMouse and Console. And there's obviously elements here that that's repetitive from MintScan and Big Dipper, right? MintScan has a scanner, right? So why are we like kind of funding a duplicated effort to have like a block explorer on CloudMouse, right? So I'd rather use those funds to focus on things that are more important, right?
Yeah, I get it, but we don't
nature.
ask funding. Sorry to interrupt you. We don't ask funding for Block Explorer in the current proposal. And I just wanted to address your first point about granularity of our proposal. If you look at the first version at the top of the page, the like Q2 and Q3 were like really broad, like you were mentioning, and in the second version, I really took the time. Well, we took the time to really drill down a bit more the features to be a bit more explicit what it means and like granular it down the way I thought I see it.
But it's still by quarter, right? So I would like implement improved uptime solution. That's a project, right? And you need, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000 for that particular project, right? Be very clear on what the project is, what the deliverables are going to be, and how those deliverables are going to be like validated, right? So you need money for that. Second is token on ramp using Cato. Great, right? It's a great feature. You need X amount of dollars for that. Improve billing module. Great. So I want to see project-based granularity instead of like I need funding for a quarter or a year, right? Because then how is it validated? How is it like? How do you stay accountable, right? How does community sort of like take a look at this and be like, hey, yes, we did this right? So that's my concern.
Yeah, I understand. It's a valid concern. I guess in our case, I feel like it's more of a trusting process, but I know that it's not.
It's not about trust. It's not about trust. It's more about what can go wrong will go wrong. It's about having those checks and balances, right? To make sure that you're also setting the precedence for the future funding, right? Right. Sure. If this goes through, all the future projects are going to follow lead in like proposing, and that's going to open a whole can of worms that we don't know how it's going to happen. So it's very, very important to get this right, because CloudMouse is arguably one of the top ecosystem partners for Akash and ecosystem contributors, right? So it's an opportunity for us to set an example as to how we want the future funding to look like. So I want to do this really right. And plus the amount is about 1/3 community pool, and it's a large amount, right? So it's a large ask. Even the reduced proposal, about $150,000, still 1/3 of the community fund. So a lot of parameters here that that indicate that we have to get it right. Cheng?
Yeah, I agree, and I understand that. If there can be one, for example, precedent, not exactly precedent this moment in time to follow, Max and everyone, I'd like to submit for consideration, is if you look at, for example, the hackathon and the events discussion that was posted by Adam Wozni there, in that we're requesting funds from the community pool in order to do a lot of these Akash Network related activities, right? For both the community building and generating just buzz, recruiting vanguards, et cetera. It runs the gamut, right? And the hackathon itself, as far as like prizes that'll go out, maintenance, all those particular things have a lot of it's really not necessarily about a trust thing, but accountability, right? So for in terms of submitting that particular proposal, and currently still lives as the discussion before it makes it to a governance prop, is about accountability. This is how we plan on using those funds. and we're going to account for them on a quarterly basis to say, here's what the actual expenditure was, here's what was requested. If there is a delta, what are we going to do with that delta, right? And in terms of how do we even on down to once the funds are received, what is the responsible custody mechanism to what is the responsible potential liquidation mechanism, all that kind of stuff is outlined there so that there is maximum visibility and accountability to the community, so that there isn't, and it's not necessarily a trusting, but it's really just establishing a precedent that, hey, we're going to be fully accountable and we're going to totally open this up such that everyone and anyone in the community can poke holes and ask questions, because we understand how important it is, right, to really moderate how the funding is kind of doled out and ultimately how it's going to be used.
Yeah, I agree with you. For sure, you can't rely on trust for like all the grant asks, including us. I mean, you can't like just have rules for somebody and not for the rest. And I understand.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And to your point, I think it's worthwhile to create, because there's no like really template out there for these kind of things, right? So I think it's worthwhile for us to work together on what is a format, something that can be repeatable and everyone adheres to the same format, right? Like for example, anything with the government, you're going to fill out a form, right? What does that form look like? What's the information that's requested? So I think that's something that we can put on the short list of things to do to streamline and the governance process.
Quickly on that note, I'll mention I've started to draft kind of a best practices governance proposal doc that people can use as a template for whenever they have ideas that they want to request community funds for. I'm still kind of building it out and having people review it, and I'll be sharing it with the community for feedback as well. So that should go live, hopefully in the next few days here or so.
Awesome. Thank you, Oz.
Go ahead, Max.
So yeah, to talk about the concern about being the proposal being too broad and preferring the proposal being just single projects per proposal. The only issue that I have with this is making these proposals, going through the discussions, putting them on chain, waiting for the voting process is a very lengthy process, and this is the reason why we bundled a bunch of the projects that we believe after 2 years of spending with the community and being in the forefront of like the adoption, getting the feedback from the community, from new users, existing users. That's what we came up with all the problems and solutions and projects that we strongly believe that will fix or at least improve these problems into a single larger ask and proposal, which in the result of this is that we spend less time planning these and like being less on a shorter time frame every time waiting for like approbation from these projects and stuff. So it's just for efficiency, really.
Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Max, thanks for doing this. And like looking through this, I think there's two things. There's like big projects, and then there are incremental features. And I was just thinking the exact same thing that you were talking about, which is that like for kind of like ongoing incremental features, it's too onerous to do big, proposals and things like that. So I think that like this steering committee should take it upon itself to reformulate or revive what we had previously with the community awards board, so we can kind of fast track some of these projects. I think it is important to have things like well defined for the community to be funding, but it is quite onerous to go through a governance process for all of them. For the bigger ones, yeah, I think it makes sense to like, this is the spec that we're doing for, something, for instance, for the analytics that you have in here, the API, this is what we're going to be building. it's a full-blown big project, that's fine. For like improving, Z stuff, maybe that could be done through kind of less onerous or red tape filled processes. I think that's something that we need to get better at. I think it's just a big thing to bite off, is this whole thing. Now, to be fair to you, I know that this is kind of how we've been working in the past, right? You're like, this is the thing, here's a bunch of money and we're going to do a whole bunch of things. But I think that like we're getting more interest in the community. There's more people coming and being involved in the process, so that we need to be more, define things a little bit more strictly. I would say too that just throwing this out there, like I think that we're still in the phase, like we're in the phase now where I think that we really need to build like fundamental tooling for the network, and things like the web deployment tools, for instance, and APIs. Still, let me take a couple steps back. Authentication, as we know, on the network is really cumbersome to work with for web browsers. Similarly, for APIs, it's difficult to work with. So if we work together to build like a better authentication system using JOTs and things like that, I think it would really, really impact how we could grow the ecosystem. So like, I look at this and it's like, this is primarily building up CloudMost's, offerings, which is awesome. It's totally something that the network should support, but it's using a big chunk of the money that I think that should be spent on building fundamental kind of features of the network. And Max, like you've been working with the network for so long, you're like the most poised person to facilitate that, right? And it would also, be a big boon to CloudMost's productivity, because I think you wouldn't have to have this weird like intermediary proxy server and things like that. So like to me, it's like it's a big ask. I know that you can do it, but I'm very confident that you can do it. But we need to be a little bit more granular with funding. We also need to be a bit more fast moving with smaller things. And it's using a lot of funding from the community pool that I think that there's like kind of some higher priority things to work on, which would benefit all the entire network, all the apps we're trying to build on the network. So that's just my thoughts on the proposal. I know that there's been a lot of back and forth. I haven't really followed it all, so I'm just curious, like, what was the feedback on this, and was there any reason why it kind of ended up like this? Like, was the feedback followed, or do you just disagree with it?
Thanks, Adam, for the great insights. And yeah, I'm trying to follow, well, like you said, there's no like template to follow necessarily how to do these kind of proposals. And like I tried to do it as professionally as I think it should be. I know the market conditions really suck right now for everyone, so it's harder to justify these kinds of expenses. But yeah, the feedback that I got was mostly what we talked about, the Greg's feedback about the granularity. Maybe I misunderstood what that was supposed to mean, but to me it was just to expand a bit the projects that we were aiming to accomplish. I got some more feedback. I got a list, but you can follow, I guess, the discussions on GitHub. There was some feedback about the general ask. Initially, it was for 300K and for 4 quarters, and we split it into two proposals. And
so let me just ask real quick. For the people that have been participating in like the data and the analytics working groups, is like what you're targeting in here? Is that something that can like basically be carved out and allocated by the data working group? Like, is that something that's ready to go? Is it defined enough to be able to do? Is there a reason why it's in here instead of like having gone through that process? I know that Anil, I know that you're part of that working group as well. I'm just, it's because, right? Like, so we have this process we're going through with the community about we want things for analytics, right? Of course, we need business intelligence tools. Okay, so we've gone through and defined these things. And we also have a proposal here for kind of the same things. Is there alignment in the two things? Is it more well defined in the analytics working groups?
Yes, if I can jump in really quick, and then I know Greg had his hand up for a while
Yeah,
now
sure.
as well. So really quick, to answer your question, Adam, Max was definitely part of those SIG analytics meetings as well. And essentially what we talked about there, at least in the analytics meeting, was, we went over the spec for what kinds of questions we want to answer with analytics data. That spec was in a discussion for a while, and then it was in a PRD. The indexer that Max has, or that CloudMoss has today, answers quite a few of the questions. It doesn't answer all of them. It answers quite a few of them. But at least at the time of discussion, the indexer was not open source. I don't believe it's open source even now. And there is no public APIs for accessing it either. So I think this proposal basically talks about open sourcing it, or at least providing public APIs. I'm sorry, I didn't read the most recent version of this in detail, but if it's open sourced and it's able to support the questions that were in that spec, then the answer to your question, Adam, is yes. But it's a little bit gray. It maybe supports 80% of it, and maybe the CloudMoss teams decides to not open source it, but offers public APIs. Is that the same? Don't know. That's kind of where it is.
Yeah, I feel like we're doing a disservice to the process if we don't follow through on that. We have a PRD. Let's fund the development of that PRD. And I feel like Max and CloudMoss teams can definitely do it. So it feels odd to have it in here as well. But go ahead, Greg.
Well, so when it comes to like granularity and batch sizes, right? You can always batch multiple projects in a single proposal. In the sense, you can still get the 150K number if you can be more granular in terms of like project-based funding and proposal per project. You can say like analytics, you want to open source, you want to implement this PRD that was published in the SIG analytics group, and you need, I don't know, like 50K for that. That's one. And other projects that you need, like Cato money, bringing fiat on ramp, you need 25K for that. That's another project. So you can batch all those projects and give into a single proposal instead of going through this repetitive governance, cycles, right? Which I understand is distracting and also very onerous, right? So, so if that answers your question and concerns about this onerous process.
Yes and no. I'm a bit confused with the batching and the granularity because I feel like that's what we did. We batched a bunch of projects that, yes, they could be evaluated like individually how much they would cost, for example, and that would be exactly what you were describing, or maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, be like, well, I'm going to work on this project, and it's going to take, I don't know, a month or two, and it's going to cost Y. And it's going to, project 2, I'm going to work on it for 4 months, it's going to cost X. And be very clear about what the deliverables for project 1 and project 2. You can batch them into a single proposal, which is not too many of them. Obviously, if you go like 5 projects in a single proposal, that's going to take longer for governance to understand. But if it's, if you're saying like if smaller set of projects, you can have a number of the, higher number in the batch size. But if it's like a large project, you can have, lower number, right? So, so make your best judgment, right? Like it'd be great to like break up the SIG analytics and maybe like the Cato money integrated in a single proposal, 2 projects with separate, with clear deliverables and whatnot.
For me, it's like we were having all these meetings. The point is to open up the process, right? And so we have all these meetings, this whole scheme for producing PRDs, and then for funding development of those PRDs. And like, again, I'm not faulting you for it. I get where you're coming from, but like, what are we? How does this impact the process that we're building for this stuff? If there's a kind of parallel thing that's like, oh well, we're also doing some of that, but kind of not really. Like it's not targeted at a PRD. It's like some line items on a proposal. Like it's just confusing from a project management perspective to be like, well, we funded this, but it's these things, and maybe we could ask for more, but maybe not. But we also spent all this time to build this PRD for, for very specific, for the comprehensive PRD. Do we then fund that too? It's just kind of confusing, and so I really do think that we need to kind of, again, I understand that this is different from the way we were working before, but the point of this whole framework that we've built up is that with the community, we go through and we build PRDs and we fund development of those PRDs. And like Greg's saying, like, yeah, let's batch some PRDs to make it less onerous, but I don't see the PRDs here. That's the thing, and then it becomes, well, we're kind of undermining this whole process that we've been working on. That's the issue with it for me. That's all.
Well, to address this, we put two of the PRDs. So one is the provider attributes, and the other one is for analytics. For the attributes, technically we already started working on this. I know Anil is aware of this, and he was, like he said in the beginning of the meeting, supposed to work a bit on it, but he doesn't have time, so it's all good. But yeah, we started working on it, and we know what to do. So that's one PRD, and the other one is for the analytics. So the PRD was looking for solutions to answer some of the analytics questions that are defined in the PRD. And I said, hey, we have our indexer that basically answers all these questions. Why not use this? And instead of like doing all the work that we already did in the past. So that's why I put the PRD in the proposal, and then I didn't describe in detail because it's in the PRD. So if you click on the PRD, you'll see all the details that we strongly believe that we can answer these questions in a reasonable amount of time instead of going and doing it from scratch, because it takes a lot of time to build an indexer and like calculate all these statistics from block genesis and stuff. So,
okay. So then we're funding Akash Analytics to implement the PRD that came out of SIG Analytics. Full stop. Is that the situation?
Well, the funding is to get these statistics, and yeah, we want to open source it, the indexer at some point. Right now, it's under the proposal too.
That's awesome. Okay.
But yeah, we want to, as it's mentioned there, give access to that data through an API in the proposal one, which I think is sufficient. This is what the PRD is asking for. We need to get this data, and we can provide it.
Okay, so just question about process, and Neil, Arthur, you have your hand up too. So when we get to it, I just want to understand like closing out a PRD and fully funding and how that works, because it sounds like this is a great avenue for that. Sorry, Arthur, I know you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead real quick.
Yeah, well, thanks. Just like real quick, my thoughts. I'm actually extending your mentioning about how, for example, CloudMOS and network can benefit from using the community pools. There are lots of things actually need to be done from the core perspective in order to improve the network quality. For example, like testing, network upgrade testing, and so on and so forth. So this part is pretty much on Overclock Labs at this point, and I think having that done by the community would be a very good example. That's number one. And number two is, things can be changed. So let's say some of those things that you mentioned in the founding proposal have been done by someone else in the parallel while you've been doing the deliverables for Q1. So how do we gonna go with the process of, okay, those funds needs to be returned, or what do we do with that? And to give, for example, if you look at Osmosis team, they send proposal for funding every month. So somebody is working on that. They spend a few hours to create a proposal for the next month deliverables. The proposal, most of the cases, they pass. So I don't think working on the proposal and chasing validators would be an issue, as soon as the proposal is really small, so everybody have understanding of what's going to be done and in really short, reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, it's just, I totally agree. I think that sounds awesome. And like to be clear, we haven't defined that process yet. Right? Like, so again, Max is coming, this proposal is coming from a place of like, we want to, this is somewhat in line with the way that things have worked historically. And we haven't really defined how something like that could work yet. But I agree. I think that we should, we should take it upon the steering committee to define. Monthly thing sounds great, especially if it's not onerous and people have had success with it elsewhere. I totally agree. Go ahead, Anil.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I just wanted to address one of the questions that Max brought up and had a question/comment as well. So Max, I apologize if I said that I should be working on the provider attributes. Honestly, I was taking it because nobody else seems to want to take it. But I mean, if you're far along, I feel like you should lead it. Like you should basically write up the spec, take the spec that exists right now, and like formalize it and submit it as a pull request for review. Because I definitely don't have to be the one doing it. In fact, you're probably in a better position to do it than me. So please don't assume that I really want to do it. I'm doing it because nobody else is. Same thing goes for other things like the omnibus stuff and others. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And then the second is the question I had was, and I should probably post this in the comment. I apologize for not doing that. Is even though you're working on this SIG analytics and adding new data to the indexer or new endpoints or whatever it is that you need to add, why is it that you're not open sourcing it until the next phase? Is it just purely the challenge of open sourcing the code, or?
The repos that we currently have are not very open source friendly, and we wanted to separate into two separate proposal to just separate it.
Okay, and then this
specific reason.
And then this bullet point about open sourcing CloudMass deploy, I thought that was already open source, but is this basically talking about the web UI versus the desktop one?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Cool. Thanks. I think Arthur, you raised your hand again, so go ahead.
No, good now. Thank you.
So like, yeah, with those two things, right? So whatever the attributes, again, I thought it said that there's a PRD. I guess there's not a PRD, but like let's PRD on that PRD with the analytics. Let's like put together like what this addresses for the analytics, what it doesn't, and what's the timeline. And I put those together in a proposal and fund it. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward. Without that, I don't really know like where we are. Like, okay, so the API, funding the API, but it's not going to be ready until Q1 2024. Like, is that okay with the people that are interested in using analytics? Like, I don't know. Are we still gonna be spending time in the meantime trying to get other solutions? It's just not clear to me. So again, I get the big, I really do understand, like, there's a big, like, hey, just fund us, you know us, we always do great work, you do always do great work, and you'll get shit done. Like, I totally no disagreement with that there. My hesitation is just like, how do we fold this into this framework that we're trying to foster for building a community around this process? So.
Sure. I mean, if someone else wants to work on these PRDs, I didn't see anyone else claiming these, so that's why we felt like we were positioned well to make them happen. And I'm not sure about the process. Once someone claims a PRD, is there supposed to be something happening or something? But I feel like doing them
for funding, right? I mean, that's just kind of typical, right? You make a PRD, the development of that gets funded. So if like funding comes before the PRD, it's kind of backwards.
Yeah, and just to answer the question, I think Max and Adam both brought up. So Adam, the PRD for provider attributes is not in the community repository. There was a PRD that was started before we went open source at the start of the year. It was a Google document that I started and shared with Max, Praetor team, and a few others. That has a whole bunch of comments on it that basically I had to clean up, do a new version of it, and post it into GitHub. So that's where that is. And then Max, to answer your question, it's really open, like we're a community. So like, just to take another example, I think there was a couple of PRDs that Luna and team came up with where I had comments, and basically they were like, yeah, feel free to submit a update to the pull request with your changes. So we can be very collaborative about this. We don't have to be like, if somebody touches it, I can't touch it anymore and stuff like that. So yeah, both of these PRDs are definitely open for anybody to take on and update and submit as a review. So that's the whole idea of the community, is like anybody should be able to chime into these pull request reviews, and anybody should be able to own any of the changes to it. Cool. I know we're well over time, but hopefully this was useful overall for everyone and for Max. And yeah, I just want to echo what Adam said, Max, is thanks for the patience on all this. I mean, I know it takes a lot of effort to put these together, and appreciate you like going through this, because we're also trying to build this for the, like, basically doing something that's not been done before, trying to create a community that builds together, even though they have, their own businesses to sustain in some ways. All right, I guess we can continue the discussion if needed on the chat, on the discussion thread there. But if there's no other questions from anyone else for today, we can probably adjourn this meeting. Just want to see any burning questions on anybody's mind that they want to bring up before we end for today. All right, I'll stop presenting, and Tyler, go ahead, Jigar.
Hey, sorry. So, Tyler, we created a working group for provider attributes. So, are we still continue doing
Yes.
that, or?
Yeah. We'll set up a meeting. I'll schedule some time for us to set up a meeting. Max, I'll follow up with you if you have any desire to create that spec in anticipation of that meeting. But again, we'll talk in Discord about the next steps. But we should definitely have a meeting sometime soon, because I know it's something that folks are working on.
Yeah, and if it makes life easy, I can take the Word document spec that I had from a while back that has a bunch of comments in it, and I can either directly create a pull request with that Word document linked, or convert it into a markdown and put it in GitHub. And then feel free to, like, anybody can feel free to take that and update it to the next version before I can. So let's work on it together.
That'd be
Sure.
great. Again, I appreciate everybody taking the extra time today. We follow up on discussions. Praetor's proposal again is up right now, and the voting period closes tomorrow. There will be a number of other proposals that will be on chain. I believe the CloudMost proposal is currently on chain as of this morning as well. So feel free to participating in voting on the proposals that are on chain based upon comments here, comments and discussions, etc. But again, notes will be updated. Recording and transcription will be added shortly after this meeting. But feel free to reach out to me or anybody else via Discord if you need anything else. There's a SIG support meeting happening tomorrow as we continue to move towards a network upgrade. And then again, follow Discord and follow the Twitter to keep up to date on everything going on across the Akash community. Much appreciate everyone's time today. Everyone have a great rest of the day. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.